Greetings, all! Today, we will be examining the common grass poison-type Pokemon Oddish, its uncommon evolution Gloom, the two collectively known as the Weed Pokémon, its rare final evolution Vileplume, and its equally rare other final grass-type evolution Bellossom, the latter two collectively known as the Flower Pokémon. Toxic to a dangerous degree in many cases, and more than capable of handling themselves against more biologically advanced Pokemon, the members of the Oddish family are fascinating plants that can more than bring some specialty plant power to a battle when pressed to do so. Oddish have fairly simple bodies, consisting of a central blue bulb that contains their small, rounded root sacs, which act as feet for them while they are walking, their bright red, pupilless eyes, and their large, typically smiling mouth. The top of their form is adorned with a cluster of 5 large green leaves, which they use to gather sunlight and water above ground for the process of photosynthesis. Their evolved form, Gloom, retain the same body color as Oddish, but now have a pair of arm-like stumps on their body that they use for grasping objects, while the eyes have changed form to become much more slit-like, and they have developed a large set of prominent purple lips, from which a glob of honey always hangs. The top of their form is adorned with a large cluster of 4 brown seed pods with white speckles, the males having more of these speckles compared to females, and them being smaller in size to boot, with a central orange pistil and a series of orange leaves that branch out and slightly curl out from their sides. Their first final evolution, Vileplume, retain the same basic body form as Gloom, though with a mouth and eye form that is more similar to that of Oddish. Their head is now adorned with a large central 5-petaled flower with white speckles, the female having a large central speckle in each leaf compared to males, and an orange center, and the flower dominates their form, hiding the entirety of their body if they are planted or otherwise only seen from above. Lastly, their alternative evolution, Bellossom, possess much smaller body forms with green skin and bright bluish-black eyes, their lower form shrouded and hidden by a skirt of green and yellow leaves that give them the appearance of a dancer. In addition, the top of their head is adorned with a pair of small but vibrant red flowers with yellow centers, giving them a gorgeous appearance that helps them to stand out despite their unusually small size. The members of the Oddish family have only recently developed into Pokemon distinct from ordinary plants, and this can be readily seen in their overall anatomy and behavior in the wild. These creatures generally start their lives as simple bulbs with basic anatomical features that help to distinguish them from ordinary plants to at least some degree, but they are primarily nocturnal in nature, only coming out under the light of the moon. This means that, at least initially, they will plant themselves below the surface of the ground during the daytime as Oddish, and the primitive nerve cluster that serves as their brain shuts down, allowing only their leaves to remain above ground to collect sunlight, water, and air in order to generate energy through photosynthesis. This is also done because the skin is initially quite fragile and easily burned and pierced by predators, making these actions imperative for their survival. Once they manage to evolve at least once, though, they begin to acquire features like stronger toxic powders and horrible smells that help to deter attack by predators. Plus, their skin becomes more resilient to the effects of sunlight, so they are able to become much more mobile during the day. As they grow and develop, these creatures specialize in learning a variety of toxin-based powder moves at a young age, and mainly only get access to special attacks that enable them to strike from afar, as their bodies are not really built for physical combat. In fact, for the most part, the attacks they learn naturally usually involve no direct physical contact at all. This does limit what they can do in battle to a considerable degree, as their move variety from all sources is also quite limited, but these plants can still make good use of their natural abilities to make themselves a threat, especially as they grow older and mature, though this also affects the moves that they can learn during development as well as the possible abilities they can possess. While all members of the Oddish family can normally only have access to the chlorophyll ability as their base ability, their forms heavily dictate the hidden abilities they can have. Because Oddish have a penchant for running away at the first sign of trouble, they get access to run away as a hidden ability. The horrible smell that often comes from Gloom grants them the stench ability as a hidden ability. The toxic pollen that Vileplume produce in massive quantities allows them to have Effect Spore as a hidden ability. And finally, Bellossom's ability to produce a soothing aroma from its body that can help cleanse its form of impurities can potentially allow it to have access to Healer as a hidden ability. In terms of stats, and looking at the final evolutions of Gloom, it can be said that there is some difference in the ways that these creatures perform in battle. Comparing the two, it can be seen that Vileplume have stronger offenses compared to their counterpart Bellossom, while vice versa, Bellossom have better defenses than their counterpart, and are thus able to take a hit more effectively. But in the grand scheme of things, the two are still very similar in the roles they can play in a fight. They both do not have the greatest degree of stamina to them, and are very slow to act, with fairly weak physical offenses to boot. On the other hand, though, their other stats are fairly decent and they can definitely take a hit and dish out some special offenses in turn, so they both have above average base special attack and special defense stats for fully evolved Pokemon of all of their types, while Vileplume additionally have an above average base defense stat for a fully evolved poison type Pokemon, and Bellossom similarly have an above average base defense stat for a fully evolved grass type Pokemon, ensuring that these plants can take a hit and keep right on dishing out damage as needed. Because they are primarily nocturnal in nature, otters spend most of the day almost completely buried in the ground with only their leaves exposed, and they generally will only come out at night because fewer predators roam the land during that period of the day. Plus, their bodies are highly energized by moonlight and thus enjoy basking in it. When the moon shines bright in the night sky, these creatures will uproot themselves and wander about on their root sacs, which typically extend roots during the daytime to absorb moisture and nutrients in the soil, but are otherwise primarily used as substitutes for actual feet, and have been known to walk as much as 1,000 feet every night, using their time to sow their seeds into the soil in hopes that they will be able to develop into more oddish with time. Though this rarely happens as the seeds are quite delicate and need very specific nutrient and moisture conditions to survive. This capacity to harness moonlight for energy actually allows these creatures, if kept from evolving for long enough, to acquire the Moonblast attack, something that their evolved forms cannot readily do under normal circumstances, and as a whole can allow them to make themselves into much more of a threat than one might initially imagine. However, it is noted that these creatures, though they do well to hide themselves, can be picked out in the daylight easily in some cases, for if they are in rich soil with plenty of moisture and nutrients, their leaves will have a glossy look to them that is not normal for other weed-like plants. Trying to pull them out, though, is probably not the best idea, as these beasts do not appreciate being plucked and put into the harsh sun if they don't have to, and will shriek loudly and violently in order to stun their attackers, hopefully giving them enough time to run away and plant themselves to hide until they are sure the coast is clear. Their penchant for mobility once garnered these creatures the name Odium Wanderers before their full evolutionary history was understood, and it is a fitting title, as it is mobility that helps to set these young sprouts apart from normal plants, and in turn has proven to be a key factor in understanding the development of ordinary plants into Pokemon across the globe. When Oddish manage to evolve into Gloom, they lose the need to be typically nocturnal as the skin becomes more resilient to sunlight, and thus can wander about at all times of the day with little problem. However, this comes at the sacrifice of being able to easily bury themselves in the ground, so to get around this, these creatures have taken to being slightly carnivorous and use a sticky honey that drips from their mouth as bait. While it might have the appearance of drool, the liquid that seeps from the mouth of these creatures, controlled by a hydraulic pump in their bodies as is the water that flows through them in general, is in fact a special honey that they make by mixing the saliva with their own pollen, and the substance is not only quite sticky and perfect for trapping small insects, but, more importantly, it gives off a horrible stench. In fact, even the pistil on their head releases a horrible, foul-smelling odor that gets stronger not only as they are threatened, but also as they smell it, the exciting aroma causing them to concentrate the chemicals in their sap to make it smell increasingly worse the longer they are exposed to their own aroma. This horrible smell, though possible to dilute to use as a component in many exotic perfumes, can be smelled from over a mile away at full strength, and is definitely something to be avoided at all costs, as it can cause those with sensitive noses to faint on the spot. Though, oddly enough, 1 out of every 1,000 people actually enjoys their smell and can handle it thanks to a rare genetic mutation that affects how the olfactory organs process the aroma. While evolution does deprive these creatures access to the later moves that Oddish can get, namely the Moonblast attack, the addition of a flower form on their bodies does at least allow them to learn the Petal Blizzard attack, allowing them to make at least some use of their physical power in battle, even if they are still better equipped for special assaults. Thankfully, this does not mean that Gloom are completely unapproachable, as they usually only release their worst smells when they feel threatened. As long as they are relaxed and in the company of someone they trust, they will not release their typical aroma and can be good companions to have around as pets and friends, so long as they are not introduced to someone unfamiliar to them too quickly or confronted in even the slightest of menacing ways. While Gloom do not normally have the need to evolve as their bodies are in a state of pseudo-maturity, exposure to certain environments over time, or the immediate exposure to an evolutionary stone can cause them to mature further into a different form. But unlike the vast majority of Pokemon that evolve via evolutionary stone, these creatures can evolve into one of 2 different Pokemon depending on the type of stone that is used on them. If these creatures are exposed to the radiant energy of a leaf stone, it causes the flower on their heads to change drastically and enlarge dramatically with a literal bang, as the seed pods in their body, as well as the central flower bulb structure, explode to make room for the flower, facilitating their evolution into Vileplume. These creatures have the largest single flower petals on the planet and are able to use them as both a hardy disguise in the wild and as a deadly tool to confound and poison those that get too close to them. The flower itself is incredibly heavy and is the reason why, even as a fully evolved Pokemon, these creatures have a hard time moving around rapidly, the flower weighing down on them and making it hard for them to even stand up sometimes with their small root feet. Even if they can stand, it is ill-advised to go near the flower, as the flower naturally produces toxic pollen that allows these creatures to not only make the most of their powder-based moves, but can be incredibly dangerous to all because of the sheer volume of pollen that these creatures can produce. By flapping the petals of their flower forcefully, these creatures can release so much toxic pollen into the air that it actually turns the color of the air to a sickening yellow, and they can cause choking and other nasty reactions in people, even if they are not allergic to pollen of any sort, potentially proving to be lethal in the worst of cases. This works out for them though, as these plants are even more carnivorous than Gloom, and will gladly paralyze others to make them into a ready meal for them to devour. This acts as the primary weapon these plants use to defend themselves with outside of actual attacks, and it can certainly make them a dire hazard to be near in almost any situation. At the very least though, some precautions can be noted, as the larger the flower is, the more toxic the pollen tends to be, and the sound of them flapping their petals is audible enough to make a quick escape possible if attempted as soon as the sound is heard. Moreover, they're usually at peak pollen production between late spring to late summer when the temperatures are at their warmest, so large, pretty flowers should be avoided at all costs during that period of time. As a whole, Vileplume are dangerous creatures that can certainly prove to be a serious threat to contend with, only made more so by the fact that they can use their massive flower to gather massive amounts of sunlight to power themselves readily with only a few hours of exposure per day, enough so that they can also utilize the powerful solar beam attack very late in life, which is otherwise inaccessible to the other members of their family. If, on the other hand, Gloom are exposed to the radiant energy of a sunstone, it causes their form to actually shrink and reduce in size in order to mutate and transform them into the delicate Pokemon Bellossom. These creatures typically thrive best in tropical climates where there is plenty of sunlight, and in fact have ditched their nocturnal lifestyle completely, closing the flowers now adorning their body at night and only opening them up in the daytime to keep them from being damaged by cooler night temperatures. In addition to experiencing an EV yield change from 2 in special attack to 3 in special defense, these creatures completely lose their poisonous natures when they evolve, converting them into pure grass types, and they lose most of the pollen-based moves and abilities associated with the rest of their family. In exchange, however, these beasts learn a host of new moves that the rest of their family has no access to that emphasize the importance of the sun and their natural plant-based powers in battle, as they gain exclusive access to the magical leaf attack as soon as they evolve, as well as the Sunny Day, Quiver Dance, Leaf Blade, and Leaf Store moves, allowing them to make the most of their offense and natural abilities in a fight. The appearances of these creatures help them to stand out, as they look absolutely gorgeous, and it is said that the foulest smelling of Gloom are destined to evolve into the most beautiful specimens of this particular evolution. These plants dedicate their lives to the sun as they need it in order to fuel their bodies, their leaves darkening into a more vibrant color the more they are exposed to sunlight, and they are among a very few select species that are actually known for worshipping the sun in a religious manner. If clouds come overhead for more than a day or two to block out the sun, or the end of a rainy season is accompanied by the sudden bursting through of sunlight, these creatures will actually perform ritualistic dances in order to summon the sun back and keep it out, so they may bathe in it continuously, which is directly connected to their ability to learn the sunny day technique with a bit of help. Seeing these dancers is said to be a rare treat and a sight to both see and especially hear, as their dancing causes the leaves that make up their plant skirt to rotate around their body along a swiveling piece of connective tissue on their torso and rub together, creating a pleasant ringing noise that can help to soothe and relax all that hear it. Not surprisingly, many southern countries where they dwell have adapted their dancing styles, which has led to the creation of many popular dances down in the tropics where they are typically found, making these tiny plants quite popular among many groups across the world and a joy to be around compared to the hazardous nature of the bodies of the other members of its evolutionary family. Though they might be seen as a health hazard for most stages of their life, the members of the Oddish family are fascinating plants that can definitely ensure that anyone that gets too close to them will get a powerful burst of powder to sicken and weaken them in retaliation. They might not have much in the way of move variety to speak of, but with what little they do have, these plants can more than make themselves a threat when confronted if breathing is something an opponent needs to do to survive. Just do yourself a favor and try to avoid these creatures in the wild when in a fully evolved state. Horrible smells are one thing to have to deal with, but if you don't get lucky and find the cuter of their two evolutionary ends, you might find yourself in a hacking and coughing fit with dire consequences for getting too close to the toxic pollen they can spread with even the slightest pondering step. Thank you all for watching this video. It is always an honor to be able to speak with you all on the subject of Pokemon in a way that brings me great joy and happiness in my work. If you would like to keep tabs on past and future work, click that subscribe button, check out my work on DeviantArt, and don't be shy about following me on Twitter, where you can find pertinent announcements on upcoming work before it is officially posted. Links to both can be found in the video description. If you would like to support my work and help Miguel and I continue to produce more content for you and improve upon our presentation, please visit us at my Patreon page, which you can also find a link to in the video description.
Yeah, no.
With that, I thank you for watching and I wish you well.